Hi there. My name is Rochelle Stevenson. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at Thompson Rivers University. Thanks for stopping by for this edition of Tap Into Research hosted by TRU. Today, I'm going to be talking about domestic violence, humans and animals in the time of COVID-19. Now, this can be a bit of an upsetting subject for some of us, but just be aware that I'm not going to be showing any graphic photos and we're not going to be using any upsetting language. But it can be upsetting for some of us to think about anybody hurting anybody else, human or animal, so just take care of yourself as we move through this really short talk today. So within the restrictions around COVID-19, domestic violence has been in the news a lot lately. There are estimates that with the social distancing and within the current pandemic and the social conditions, domestic violence has increased up to 30%. Why? Well, for one, safe or safer spaces have been restricted. So the closing of workplaces or schools, which may have been a place of safety for individuals who are being abused, are closed, and so those safe spaces are no longer available to folks. There's also the idea around increased stress levels, whether it's financial stress due to loss of work or working in a high-stress environment like frontline employment. This can aggravate existing situations at home. This does not mean that anyone who has never been abusive will start being abusive in this situation. What this does mean is that there may be an escalation in control or abusive behavior. So where do animals come in? And here is the basis of my own research, the intersection of domestic violence and animal abuse or mistreatment. So together with colleagues at the Animal and Interpersonal Abuse Research Group, an interdisciplinary group of faculty and graduate students, we are tackling questions around violence to humans and animals. We're studying the inclusion of animals in situations of domestic violence, the impact on the human and animal family members, and advocating for change in how we respond to domestic violence that's more inclusive of animal victims of family violence. What we do know is that there is a connection between domestic violence and animal mistreatment, and that companion animals or pets are often included in the victims of domestic violence. In a study published by myself and my APARC colleagues, we found that 89% of women in a domestic violence shelter who had pets reported that their pet had also been abused or mistreated. This is not a small number and supports the position of myself and my colleagues that animal abuse within relationships needs to be taken much more seriously. So why are pets included in domestic violence? Well, we're still figuring this question out, as the research in this area is still relatively young, with the majority of research happening in about the last 15 years. It might be more helpful to discuss how pets are included in domestic violence, which does tie into the why of abuse against pets. One of the ways that pets are included in situations of domestic violence is through power and control. And here's the abuser uses threats or harm to the pet to get his or her partner to do what they want, to act how they want. This could be threats around what would happen to the pet if the person was to leave the abusive relationship, or threats or harm to the animal as punishment for doing something wrong in the abuser's eyes, such as spending too much money on something or coming home later than expected. In this way, the abuse of the animal is a tool of the abuser in their abuse of the partner, and the goal of this abuse is control. Frustration or stress is another possible explanation of how and why pets are targeted. This is the idea that when people get so frustrated or stressed out, they lash out. And in the case of domestic violence, they can lash out at their partner or their pets. So this idea states that there's temporary feelings of relief after expending or expelling this stress, which is why it can become a pattern of behavior. However, in domestic violence, it's very often the weaker or more vulnerable members of the family which are targets of the frustration, and mostly women and animals. This implies that there is an underlying motivation of power. The idea around frustration and stress is also context specific. For example, a person who is frustrated at work will not physically strike out at a coworker who might be the source of that frustration. This illustrates that the abuser is aware of situations in which the abuse is unacceptable. But whatever the explanation, whether it's power and control or frustration or stress, the abuser, at least on some level, believes that the abuse against their partner or pets in the home is acceptable. This is one of the foundational problems facing us who research domestic violence. How do we shift the attitudes of the abusers? How do we stop domestic violence? This is a big question, and as a society, we are trying different methods, from court-mandated domestic violence intervention programs for individuals who have been charged or convicted with abusing their partner, to anger management and counseling, to programs in elementary schools teaching about empathy and healthy relationships. One way that domestic violence and the intersection with animal mistreatment has been confronted is in more of a reactive way, with supports for survivors of domestic violence and their animal companions after the fact. So let's return to that issue for a second. Remember that statistic that 89% of women in a domestic violence shelter reported their pets were mistreated? This is a big number, and this represents thousands of women in Canada alone and thousands of animals experiencing mistreatment. Our previous works, myself and my colleagues at APARC, also discovered 56% of women delayed leaving the abusive relationship because they were worried for the safety of their pets if they did leave. This is also a big number. So the big questions to match these big numbers is, what can we do? What is being done in the current situation, especially in light of the challenges around COVID-19? Well, we realized through our research that many domestic violence shelters were for women and children only. There was no mention or very little mention of pets. But we also knew, anecdotally and from our work in the community, that there were programs and services out there to ensure safety for all members of the family, including pets. So there was a gap in information. And this is where the recent research, funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, comes in. So conducted by myself and colleagues at APARC, together with Red Rover, which is a nonprofit organization focusing on animal safety and welfare in the United States, and a team of research assistants, we contacted every domestic violence service provider and shelter in Canada and the US. This was a lot of calls. We got some really amazing information, and with Red Rover's website platform, safeplaceforpets.org, we were able to enhance an important resource for folks who need to leave an abusive relationship with their pets. This is a view of what you would see if you went to safeplaceforpets.org. On the one side, you can view a list by state or province, and it just gives you a really complete list. On the other side, on the left-hand side, you can search by your location. I've entered British Columbia, and this British Columbia search will bring up this view, where there's a map which shows where the shelters are located. The red dots are for on-site housing, and this is where the women, children, and their pets stay together at the shelter. The green dots are for off-site housing. And so this means that these are shelters that still offer a safe haven for animals, but it's not at the shelter itself. So this could be a foster arrangement with a local organization. This could be boarding at a local kennel or veterinarian's office, volunteer network who take the pets home. But the key is, with all of these programs, all of the family members are getting out of the abusive situation safely. This gives a really great resource to find a space in your area or a space near you if you need help. If you were to click on one of the red or green dots, information pops up about the shelter itself. So clicking on the Kelowna Women's Shelter brings up the contact information. They do offer an on-site pet program, meaning that women, children, and animals can stay together. So the contact information will often include a crisis line, which is answered 24 hours a day. This is a really great resource if you need help now, and it doesn't matter whether it's 7 a.m. or 7 p.m., there are services out there. that can support you. Very often you will not find the physical location or address of these shelters, and that is for security purposes. The physical locations are kept confidential. So safeplaceforpets.org is just one of the many resources that are available out there right now. There are websites, text-back services, crisis lines, and all of them are geared towards supporting survivors of domestic violence in whatever way that they need. Here are a few other resources available for survivors of domestic violence. One is sheltersafe.ca. This is a map-based listing of shelters across Canada, hosted by Women's Shelters Canada, and it also indicates shelters with pet programs and those without. The BC Society for Transition Houses, so bcsth.ca, also offers a list of BC-based services as well as Canada-wide related services to support survivors of domestic violence. And endingviolence.org is another organization with a comprehensive list of BC-related services to support survivors. The idea is that with resources like safeplaceforpets.org in place, we can make sure that the lack of a safe space for pets is not a barrier to leaving an abusive relationship. Programs providing safety for human and animal survivors of domestic violence offer hope and a step forward into healing for all family members. Our research, the research of myself and my colleagues at APARG, help to support the creation and expansion of these very important programs. For more information about the work that APARG does, please visit the website at uwindsor.ca/APARG. And for more information about Red Rover and the amazing services that they offer in the United States, please visit redrover.org. Thank you very much for joining me for Tap Into Research today, and have a lovely day.